Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I wanted to look at the details of the JFK shooting and consider how difficult or easy it was, how much luck was involved. The reason why I thought to do this video is about 2 years ago I saw a documentary on JFK which triggered a memory from about 33 to 35 years earlier, where I was sitting in a diner. I overheard a conversation between other customers where they were talking about the JFK assassination, and they were saying what a difficult shot it was and what a great shooter Oswald had to have been to be able to make that shot. So at the time I didn't know anything about shooting. I wasn't able to to make a determination for myself. I had only shot BB guns at the time. But about 2 years ago when I watched this documentary, it triggered that memory from 33 years earlier, and I said, hey, let me, now that I know something about shooting, let me research the details and answer that question for myself. How difficult was this shooting? So I just haven't, something that's been in the back of my mind, haven't gotten around to it, but I finally said, hey, let me do this video. So let's look at the setup over here. Oswald was in the 6th floor of a building. I believe it was a book repository, I guess someplace where they store books. He's on the 6th floor, and there's a road in front of him that curves the way you see this red line over here, right? So it's a curving road. It comes in at about 45 degrees, and then it kind of straightens out, okay? JFK's car was traveling at about 11 miles per hour. Right. Now, because of this curve, right, if Oswald is in the building over here on the 6th floor, JFK would have been out of his vision over here. Then at some point he would have came into his vision, right? So Oswald would have had to, acquire him, track him, and take his shots. Oswald took 3 shots. The first shot missed. Second shot hit his arm. Third shot hit JFK's head. Okay, the first shot was at 58 yards. The second shot was someplace in between. The third and final shot was at 90 yards. Okay, so distance-wise, first shot being at 58 yards. Most of you people watching this video, you zero in your rifles at 50 yards. Okay, so 58 yards is not a very long distance. Even 90 yards is not a long distance. For those of you guys with AKs, you would typically zero your AKs in at 100 yards. Okay, so distance-wise, this is, for a rifle, this is a very short distance. Okay, so the significant factor here, though, is that because the car was traveling at 11 miles per hour, basically Oswald had between 5 to 8 seconds to get these 3 shots off. Okay, so he's got somewhere between 5 and 8 seconds, and he's using a bolt action rifle. So that's a significant factor here. So let's take a look at Oswald, his shooting experience. He was in the Marines. Okay, his primary job was radar operator. Okay, so he wasn't a sniper or anything like that. He was a radar operator. But like all Marines, he had to, he was trained as a shooter. He had to go through qualifications. In 1956, he qualified as a Marine sharpshooter, okay? Not an expert. That would have been the rank above that. So he qualified as a sharpshooter. And in 1959, when he qualified again, his score dropped down to marksman, okay? So he fell from sharpshooter to marksman. Okay, so we see his skills slightly degrading, which is not surprising given the fact that his primary job was radar operator. He wasn't a sniper. Okay. Now, while he was in the Marines, he did get court-martialed for accidentally shooting himself with a .22, which was unauthorized. He wasn't supposed to have that gun at the time. I guess this happened on base. He got court-martialed for that. I believe they demoted him in rank. Then he got court-martialed again for fighting with a sergeant, right? And then he ends up in the Philippines doing some type of guard duty where he discharges his rifle. Okay, this was an unauthorized discharge. He gets into some type of trouble for that. I don't believe there was a court-martial, but he gets into some type of trouble. And then shortly after, he gets what they call a hardship discharge. Okay, so it wasn't an honorable discharge, it wasn't a dishonorable discharge, it was a hardship discharge. So that's Oswald while he was in the Marines. Now let's look at the rifle that he used. According to the FBI, it was an Italian mannlicher-carcano, which they described as a very cheap, crappy rifle. I have an image over here of the back side of the rifle, right? So this would be the back of the stock over here. Basically, these would be the sights on top. So that's the rear sight. That line over here is your front sight. And then what it had is it had a scope that was offset. So the scope came up, curved, kind of came up, curved around, and there's your scope. Okay. So when the FBI tested that scope, they found that the scope wasn't working very good. When they tried to change the elevation, the windage would shift. When they tried to change the windage, the elevation would shift. So the scope was not in good working order. It was difficult to zero in. They said that it had a very poor trigger. From the description I read, it basically indicates that there was a lot of travel on the trigger. Okay, so it had a very poor trigger, and they said that the action of the bolt, because this was a bolt action rifle, every time you fire a shot, you got to work the action. They said it was very stiff, very difficult to work, and keep your sights on target. So, in order to cycle the bolt, right, he had to basically, most likely had to take his sights off of target. He couldn't just stay on target and work the action. Okay, so he's using a very difficult rifle. So I think that's a very significant factor. So let's go back to the actual shooting. He's on the 6th floor. The car's traveling at 11 miles per hour. It's out of his view over here. At some point over here, it comes into his view. So he starts tracking it, right? Now this is me speculating. He starts tracking it at 58 yards. He takes that first shot. Because now here's the thing. With this sideways motion over here, right? So if the car is traveling at 11 miles per hour in the diagonal vector, the horizontal motion would have been, let's say, about 5 miles per hour. So it's moving about 5 miles per hour sideways, starts to straighten out a little bit. So it probably drops to about, it probably drops to about 4 miles per hour. Okay. I'm guessing that as he was tracking him, he picked a point, all right, just up ahead of that trajectory, and as soon as JFK's right shoulder, came into the reticle on the scope or his front sight, as soon as his let's say his reticle touched JFK's shoulder, he took his shot. Okay, that's what I'm guessing. He may have taken the first shot with the scope. Okay, first shot missed, but I suspect that the second and third shot he switched to his iron sights, and the reason is because he's got to work a heavy bolt. All right, I'm assuming that he stabilized the rifle for the first shot. He's got to work the bolt, get it stable again. It was probably a lot quicker, faster just to go to the iron sights. Takes the second shot. So again, most likely he's picking a spot just up ahead of where he expects, JFK's body to be traveling through. And as soon as JFK's shoulder touched his front sight post, he took that shot, because by the time he squeezed the trigger, basically his body would have centered up to his front sight post. He's looking at the backside now. So, again, this was a convertible, so he's only seeing, let's say, from the chest up. So as soon as that front sight post touched his shoulder, he probably squeezed the trigger. By the time he reacted, the center of his chest probably moved to where the front sight post was. Now the second shot hit JFK in the arm. Okay. All right. Then he worked the bolt again. Now at 90 yards. He takes the third shot. The third shot is a headshot. Okay, so again, I'm speculating he put the front sight post on the shoulder. JFK's car moved into it so that it's centered. He takes the third shot, which was a headshot. So what we're seeing here between, I'm the first shot was at 58 yards, third shot at 90 yards. I'm going to say that the second shot was, I don't know, let's say somewhere at about 75 yards, okay? So from 75 yards to 90 yards, right, we're seeing that the first shot hit him in the arm. The second shot hit him in the arm. Second shot's in the arm. Third shot's in the head. You've got, I don't know, about 16 inches over here between head shot, and it was like towards the top. It was like up here somewhere. Came in through the back and kind of just went through the top over here. So between the arm and the head, there's at least 12 inches, probably 16 inches. So we're looking at about a 16-inch group at less than 100 yards. All right. So that's a very wide group. So that tells us something. I think the most significant factor here is that he was using a really bad rifle, which negates how good he may have been. Okay, and I think he was like, he was a decent shooter. He wasn't an expert shooter. His skills probably degraded, since he came out of the military. The FBI said that Oswald had only fired about 10 shots with this rifle. He ordered this rifle through the mail. Okay, back then you could do that. Unfortunately, as a result of this incident, we can no longer order guns through the Postal Service. But the FBI said that he had only fired about 10 shots with this rifle, so he wasn't very familiar with the rifle. He may have not even been aware that the scope was not working really well. So I think that, again, a significant factor here. I think that the fact that this was a crappy rifle that he didn't have a whole lot of experience with would completely negate how great of a shooter he may have been if he was, which I don't think he was a super shooter anyway. So that's the picture that we're seeing. I think he was good enough to know that he needed to stabilize the rifle and that he needed to line up his sights. And with that, he was able to get about a 16-inch group, inside of 100 yards. So going back to the purpose of this video, which is answering the question from 35 years ago, how good of a marksman did Oswald need to be to make that shot? And the answer is not very good at all. It's basically even 12 inches at 90 yards is a very wide group. So I think that kind of answers my question. Okay, so I hope you guys found this information interesting, because I find it interesting. That's why I'm doing this video. If you have any comments, put it in the comment section. One thing I did not address was competing theories about additional shooters. Okay, because and I've heard them. I know that there's a lot of theories out there about multiple shooters, because for whatever reason, some people say that this was an impossible shot. I don't think it was an impossible shot at all. Maybe it was an impossible shot because of this crappy rifle. But even a crappy rifle at inside of 100 yards, is going to hit the target. If he was putting his front sight at the shoulder, basically the car would have moved the body to the target. At this short distance, he would not have to adjust for, he wouldn't have to adjust for any movement or anything, okay? Or any elevation or anything like that. Basically the car would have basically just drifted him. In that split second, the car would have brought his body from shoulder, brought the front sight from shoulder to center. And I think that would have, that would have put him in the general area where he was trying to get. The fact that he got a headshot, was basically just pure, luck or bad luck, however you want to look at that. But what I was starting to say is that I'm not looking at competing theories about multiple shooters, because that's not the question I was looking to answer here, right? I was looking to answer that question from 33 years ago about how good of a shooter did he need to be to make the shot, and the answer is I don't think he needed to be that great at all. So if you guys have any comments, put in the comment section. If you're not a member, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon.